Good and faithful or wicked and slothful? Of course, we all want to be called good and faithful. We all want to be good and faithful. These words were spoken by a master in the story that was told by Jesus. In today's video, I want to talk to you about 3 crucial misunderstandings that costed the slave very dearly. You know, the slave who got 1 talent and said to his master that he was mean and harsh and unjust man. Also, do you know that this parable is an answer to a question that the disciples asked Jesus? They asked, what will be the sign of your coming, and what will be the sign of the end of this age? I wanted to point out that this is a story of not only a lost opportunity and a wasted life, but it is a story of a huge misunderstanding on part of the servant who got the 1 talent, and this is absolutely where we can all identify, or at least I can identify with his lack of understanding. Let's go ahead and read Matthew chapter 25 from verses 14. For it here means the end of the world, will be just like a man who was about to take a journey, and he called his servants together and entrusted them with his possessions. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability. And then he went on his journey. The one who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made a profit and gained 5 more. Likewise, the one who had 2 made profit and gathered 2 more. But the one who had received the 1 went and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now please note that the master did not give them all equally. He gave them according to their ability. And I'll tell you later why this is so important. Also, the talents that were given are not for ownership, but for stewardship. There's a big difference between both of them. Now let's continue reading. Now after a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them. And the one who had received the 5 talents came and brought him 5 more, saying, Master, you entrusted to me 5 talents. See, I have made a profit and gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful and trustworthy over a little. I will put you in charge of many things. Share in the joy of your master. The one who had received 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a harsh and demanding man, reaping the harvest where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid to lose the talent, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is your own. The last slave had a huge problem. He had a misunderstanding problem. He seriously lacked understanding in 3 important areas of his life. He lacked understanding of the master, he lacked understanding of the talent he was given, and he lacked understanding of himself. Let's go ahead and see the first one. He lacked understanding of the master. You know, although he has been serving the master, he had no idea of what the master is like. He thought his master to be a harsh, demanding man, going after unjust gain in spite of receiving a gift from him. Can you believe that? A lot of times we walk through our Christian journey really not knowing who God is like, what characteristics God has, how He operates, how much He really loves us, what His attributes are. You know, we try to put God in a box from what we hear others talk about Him. We very rarely take time to really know and understand the character of God. That's why the Bible says the knowledge of God is understanding. It gives us wisdom, it teaches us the right perspectives. When we have a wrong view of God, we end up with a wrong view of everything else, including us. And that's why A.W. Tozer, he says, what comes into our mind when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Let me say that again. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. You know, the view of God we have during a crisis reveals if we will overcome the crisis or if the crisis will overcome us. This is so important to have this basic foundation because it determines how we come out through trials. You know, I love what Job says. In the midst of his suffering, he says, even though he kills me, I will hope in him. You know, that serious trust in the character of God. The key to enjoying peace during turbulent times is having a solid experiential knowledge of God. Nothing can shake you when you know your God, and that's why in Daniel 11 chapter 32nd verse it says, "But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits." And in another translation it says, "The people who know their God will display strength and take action." You know, people who know their God, they are action takers. The slave here didn't know his master, and as a result, he didn't have any strength or courage to take the action that he was supposed to take. He dug a hole and hid it. The second thing he lacked was he lacked understanding of the talent. Let me go back and read verse 14. "And he called his servants together and entrusted them with his possessions." You see, everything we have, our possessions, our relationships, our opportunities, our gifting is all his. It's the Lord's. This is a story of stewardship, not ownership. Everything we are and have is a blood-bought grace gift by Jesus Christ. The slave here received 1 talent, while the other received 5 and 2 each. It might seem unfair that the slave received only 1. We should always remember that God's kingdom does not run on fairness. No, it doesn't. God's kingdom runs on His sovereignty. He gives to everyone according to their ability, and that is why it is important to notice that He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and not "well done, good and fruitful servant." You know, God sees our faithfulness and not necessarily our fruitfulness, not how much we produce. The one who got 5 produced 5 more, but the one who got produced 2 more. And in both cases, they both produced 100%. But it's different in numbers, right? He did not compare the second servant with the first, who produced 5 more. The master didn't do that. He called them both faithful. It is so important to know that comparison is such a crippling game. Anytime we begin to compare, we begin to lose. Now, I don't know if this particular slave compared himself with the other 2 and felt small. I don't know if he realized that the talent he had, that he was given, had the potential to increase, that it had the potential to earn a place for him at the master's table. Not to be a servant, but to enter in the joy of his master, to sit with him at the table. He lacked the understanding that the talent had the potential to lead him to greatness. It had the potential to take him into a special grace with the master, but rather his ignorance resulted in facing the wrath of the master. Did you give thought to what you've been given or gifted in your life? Did you ever think that you've been only given 1? You know, a lot of the times the people who think they have just 1 or none are the ones who end up not doing anything for the kingdom. You know, the feeling is paralyzing, especially when you see people who are gifted in multiple things. You look at yourself and think that you can't make a difference in this world. It's not a feeling of motivation, I know. It's a feeling of being useless. But remember, God is not looking at the amount of fruit, the fruitfulness so much, but our faithfulness. It's not "well done, good and fruitful servant," but remember, it is "well done, good and faithful servant." The lack of understanding of the talent not only left him a regret, but also no reward. The third thing he lacked was he lacked understanding of himself. You know, many years ago, I went through a certain program with a mentor, and it had really been so helpful in knowing what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and what I need to work on, and how to handle those weaknesses. We go through so much in our life not really knowing ourselves, not really realizing what our fears are, what we are bondage to, what our strongholds are, what are keeping us from living a full life, and where we keep making the same mistakes again and again. Now let me ask you, what is the opposite of faith? If you thought doubt is the opposite of faith, think again. Fear is the opposite of faith. See what the servant responded to the master. In verse 25 it says, "So I was afraid to lose the talent and went and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is your own." I was afraid. That's what he said. You know, fear paralyzes us and keeps us from taking action. Faith gives us courage. It encourages us and leads us to take action. The servant had no clue that because of his distorted view of the master, He had fear complexes built in his mind that kept him from taking action. He thought by keeping the talent safe and hiding it in the ground, he could avoid trouble. Many times we have fear complexes in our mind. We may think, I don't know if it is the Lord's will for me to do that, so I just won't even try. We think that inaction, not taking action, is God's will. That inaction is a safe place. We think that it's safe to dig a hole and keep it there. But watch out, you will have to hear some really severe words like, you wicked and slothful servant, from the Master. You don't want to hear them. If he finds you idle and lazy and not doing anything with what you've been given, you probably will end up hearing those words. Do you know your fears? Do you have self-awareness? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? Do you know your giftings? Or do you know what your emotional triggers are? What bothers you and how you can regulate yourself? Remember, the Master is away, but it won't be too long before he comes back. He is coming back. If you want to be ready for him, you should be operating in the knowledge, in the experiential knowledge of understanding who the Master is, of understanding your talent, of what you've been given, and understanding yourself, that you are the person that the Master lovingly entrusted his treasure, and he's coming back to ask an account of you. My final question is, are you ready? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.